You're listening to Intellijel Multigrain and Intellijel Sealegs in combination. Two really great modules, and the Multigrain allows me to prepare some nice sounds for a performance, while Sealegs puts me into precise control over what happens with these sounds. Because what you heard wasn't only the delay from Sealegs, it was also the fog reverb, which can be put on top of the dry signal. So if I, for example, turn down the mix and play one single sound and turn down fog 2, you can hear it's really dry. Now I'm turning up fog, and there is our long reverb, and this is now on top of the dry signal. But if I change the routing, then it will only be on the delays, for example, but it can also be shortened. This is just the really mighty fog, and if I hit the Alt button and turn it down and then turn the volume up again, you can hear now it's just a short reverb. Let's just show the different delays that Sealegs is offering. For example, there is tape, BBD and digi. So if I, for example, play this in latch mode and put the mix totally wet, so I only hear the delay, then we will be able to hear the difference between the different delay modes in sound. This is BBD, including a different color. Now setting filters to neutral. And this is tape. You can hear tape sounds a bit cleaner, but can also get some wow and flutter. And this is digital. So I'm turning this down again because it's a bit annoying. Let's try it again in a shorter version. And let's also explain that we have different delay lengths here. For example, long, medium and short. Short is even capable of couple strong sounds, but let's have some longer delays now. And this is the digital delay now, which means that if I change delay length, I won't have pitch effects. But it's also notable that we have now the setting time and width, which means this is time and this is width. Let's try again. It's a very long delay now. Make it shorter. So those little switches will also be in the sound. Let's turn down the fog again and the feedback. And let's give it another try with a different setting. Let's go to tape and medium. And if I change time now, I get the pitch effects. And this is controlling width. And if I'm in Pong mode, I'm listening to 2 different delays. And the second slider kind of sets an offset for a second delay. And left-right, of course, allows me to have different delay lengths left and right. Now turn up the feedback again. And now turning down the delay very short. That's how it sounds. So this is kind of a tonal delay. This is what K plus strong usually does. And there are also more options. For example, I'm now always turning up a drive, so the signal gets a little bit of distortion and drive, which has been updated in firmware 1.3. It's now a little bit more bright, but you can set this back to an old behavior. You can also have noise additionally. And if you hit Alt, then you can choose different kinds of noises, including crackling. And the former crackling had been a bit intense, so in firmware 1.3 we have a less intense crackling. But of course, how interesting this sounds depends on the loudness, and if I release Alt, then I can turn it down. So if the crackling is too loud, it won't sound good anyway. So I recommend to turn the crackling down a bit. Of course, the strength of the module is that you have lots of options to modulate all those parameters and have attenuators per parameter. And you can also use the modulation part for other purposes. For example, if you use a delay with modulation, then the modulation depth will affect the time. And since we're now in tape mode, this affects the pitch also. But if you want the modulation section to affect something different, then you always got the option to get out of this modulation output into the aux CV output, and then you can choose via Alt a different aux destination, and for example drive or noise or fog or mix, and the modulation amount will always come out here fully. So if you turn down depth here, there's no more modulation depth regarding the time, but you can adjust the aux CV here, so you can see what happens with the modulation. Let's try it out. Obviously, we're now modulating the fog. This is also an interesting option to modulate within Sealegs. And then, of course, there's also freeze option. So now I freezed it. And what happens after freezing depends a little bit on the mode you're in. Let's try BBD. And as you can see, the pitch effects are quantized. So if I use BBD and change the time, I have pitch effects, but they sound not too chaotic. They always sound a bit chaotic, but they sound okay because I seem to have a quantized reaction when changing the time. So that should be it for now. I hope you've got an impression about what Sealegs can do. My verdict is that Sealegs is, compared to Mimeophone, for example, or to Nautilus, or to Magneto from Strymon, the Sealegs is a bit more controllable. So my main point, what I really like about it, is that you really have control with those dedicated filter knobs. In a precise way that you don't have elsewhere usually. Sometimes there's a color adjustment, for example in Mimeophone, or you have tape age in Magneto, or you have different modes in Nautilus, but this is really engineering old school style and I really like it. Apart from that, you can always use something like color, which sounds here interesting with BBD, and with tape mode sounds a bit like dropouts, a bit tape wobbly, and in digital mode we also get some bit crushing artifacts. Apart from that, of course, the drive can contribute to a really interesting sound result from Intellijel Sealegs.